You. My name is Hal Sriver, and I am a senior solutions engineer here at Unravel Data. For those folks that don't know Unravel Data, we are a data ops and FinOps industry-leading observability, really actionability platform built for modern data stacks like Snowflake and even others like Databricks, BigQuery, EMR, Hadoop, to name some others. So throughout my years as a pre-sales engineer in the data space, I've had the pleasure of working with some of the largest customers. Most recently here at Unravel, where some of the ones are at the bottom of the screen here, and helping them solve for some of their most complex challenges around cost and performance optimization when using platforms like Snowflake. And so in today's topic, cloud cost control, strategies for scaling data operations without breaking the budget on Snowflake. So what I'd like to do, I think, is let's start out the topic of conversation where probably a typical customer journey, what that's like, right? So for some of the audience here who have been maybe using Snowflake and have been trying to scale their data operations, right? What does that journey look like? So maybe you've started off with some migration use cases, right? Maybe you were looking to modernize some legacy workloads in your organization by migrating to a very powerful data platform like Snowflake. And maybe this, might have been something initially like an on-prem Oracle or a Teradata or a plain old vanilla, right, SQL Server, and a migration from those to Snowflake. Or you might have just started your journey from within Snowflake itself. And in all those cases, right, you probably started out small and you wanted to prove the technology from a performance standpoint, but then also from a cost standpoint as well. And so maybe you started off your journey with some initial use cases that were pretty small in nature from that POV, perspective. But once you were convinced that the technology worked and things were, not too cost prohibitive, maybe you were starting to think about, operationalizing things. So what did that look like? Maybe you were setting up some dashboards, pulling together some teams. I see like a lot of FinOps and data ops teams get introduced at this point. And really what you're looking to do is to set up some monitoring capabilities so that way you can make sure your existing workloads that that you've onboarded so far are working and they are performant. You're kind of getting in front of stability issues and maybe things which are cost effective from that standpoint. And last but not least, throughout that journey, a lot of organizations are thinking about scaling. So things are starting to come together. They're starting to fall into place. You might have some guardrails in place, some governance, right? You may have some dashboards and reporting set up. And really now you're just trying to add more workloads and just drive additional value out of your data initiatives. Okay, so that's the journey, kind of the setup here. And if you're on this call and you're looking to scale, then maybe this next slide here might resonate with you. And I like to say that these things that I've noticed with a lot of organizations are, trying to scale, but they're getting inhibited. So the first one here, let me just go forward on a couple of these. The first one here would be just balancing cost and performance, right? This is a huge one, and that's why I put it first here. So just simple things, or you think they're simple, such as compute trade-offs, right? So knowing, for example, what type of warehouse should I select so that way I can get performance if I'm, let's say, a data engineer, but also at the same time being cost effective. It's not very straightforward, as a lot of you might have already realized. And a lot of times organizations just think that, just continuing to add more resources, that's going to solve the problem. But in many cases, that's not the case. You may just be consuming more credits needlessly, without really solving for the problem. But it could also just be balancing cost performance in terms of infrastructure inefficiencies. So things such as auto termination, different scaling policies, limits around concurrency, single versus multiple clustered warehouses, right? How do I use all these things effectively? Some of the newer features today, like taking advantage of things like query acceleration via that, serverless compute. Does that make sense for your workload or for your organization? A lot of these things are pretty complex, and trying to figure out what's the best from a cost performance standpoint sometimes leaves customers to not really add on additional workloads until they can get a better handle or feel better about where they're at right in that journey. So next, technical expertise requirements. So I also see a lot of folks or customers, right, who struggle from a technical standpoint. So things like tuning demands, being able to fine tune and configure an advanced data platform like Snowflake requires a deep knowledge of both, well, data warehousing, right, but also data storage and schema design, workload specific tuning, other skill sets, like let's say navigating, information schema to gain insights. Things that say, for example, maybe your SQL engineer might not have the background for, and it just might be confusing for them. So there's sometimes a steep learning curve for Snowflake specific services like dynamic tables or Snowpipe. When is it most cost effective to leverage these? When should I use or not use has been an inhibitor to scale for a lot of organizations. It could also just be, how do I use information schema views in an effective way? And without the expertise of these, this can become very cumbersome for a lot of organizations. So last bullet here, but not least, workload like alignment challenges, right? So things such as over engineering risks, leveraging, for example, like I had just mentioned, multi-cluster warehouses, when maybe just right sizing your virtual warehouse is more cost-effective option, as well as more performant as well. There could also just be challenges, just understanding why a pipeline has failed. So pipeline troubleshooting, complexities that are introduced when maybe using other orchestration tools like Airflow, right? Which might make it difficult to track why pipelines fail. It reduces, trust in the stability of the platform. On top of all this, you have workloads that are continuously changing. So you simply cannot just set it and forget it, right? And think that, if I spent like a month out of the year trying to do tuning, that's, going to solve all your challenges. It's just simply not the case. So those are some of the inhibitors to scaling efficiently and effectively. So what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to go ahead and show you how a purpose-built platform like Unravel can solve for some of these inhibitors. So, oops, that's my last slide for later. Let's get out of here. Alrighty. All right, we're going to switch over to the UI now. So what I'm going to do here first is start out by showing you, so this is Unravel's DataOps, FinOps observability / actionability platform. It is purpose-built for Snowflake. And so what we do is we easily connect into your Snowflake environment by running basically some information schema queries on your essential warehouses that require the monitoring. So nothing too intrusive from that standpoint. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to focus on this home tab, and more specifically, I'm going to scroll down a little bit to this insight analysis section. And you'll notice there's some subsections here: warehouses, queries, data, operations. And so what Unravel is doing is it's using its purpose-built AI to find where all of the inefficiencies are in an organization's Snowflake estate. And those inefficiencies are preventing them from actually scaling effectively. So if we take that first example of balancing cost with performance and associate, that to compute, the warehouse side of the equation, right? So this kind of subsection here. And if we're understanding, what are some of the things that I can do from that warehouse, that compute, that infrastructure standpoint, to help with that balance, right? Cost and performance. So I'm going to take that as a first use case here. And before I jump into some of these inefficiencies, what are we looking at here? So first of all, what are the different ways to scale warehouses in Snowflake? So first of all, we have, our t-shirt sizes, right? The more commonly referred to as the scale up architecture. Hey, I have a large, which gives me 16 cores, 64 gigs of RAM, a medium, a small, whatever, an extra small or something that gives me, less than that, 8 cores, a couple of gigs of RAM. This is where I'm thinking about my workload, running my heaviest workload maybe, right? I need a lot of memory. I need a lot of CPU because I'm servicing my heaviest queries. I'm a developer, especially, if I'm an inexperienced one, and if given the option, I'm always going to pick the biggest, beefiest, baddest, VM to run my workload, but I might not always need it. I'm not thinking about cost, and I'm definitely not thinking about, scaling the platform, out into the future, right? I need my job, my query to not fail. Or there's that scale out architecture, right? Autoscaling comes to mind here and comes into play. I start out with one t-shirt size, extra small, and then, on down the road, I have 10 of those. This is our classic concurrency use case. So how many users at once do I expect to service? This is my, retail store example, or the, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. operation where I have, my heaviest users between those times, but at night, fewer. So keeping all that in mind, let's talk about a few things here, right? Unravel provides several insights: underutilization, right? Queries running on, oversized warehouses, or queries running on undersized warehouses, sub optimal settings in terms of min and max, cluster settings. Excuse me. And I'm just going to focus on this top one here, just for the sake of time, around underutilization. This is a common use case, right? And Unravel defines a warehouse being underutilized when the workloads running on the warehouse do not utilize the full extent of the resources available, right? We're leaving resources on the table. We're leaving dollars on the table. And so therefore those workloads, they could run on a smaller and cheaper warehouse without performance degradation, right? That's also key. So I'll call out a couple of other things here, especially for like those FinOps conscious members of the audience today. What we're showing is 3 areas. So wasted costs, right? In the last 7 days, by not having the appropriately sized warehouse, matched to my workload, but also untapped savings, right? Here in the middle. On an annualized basis. So really giving those FinOps folks the built-in dashboards, we're informing them, right? We're informing the user on where to focus your attention first, second, and so on, right? From an optimization standpoint. Where do I spend my time optimizing warehouses in the most effective way so that I'm, running a leaner Snowflake machine, right? I'm freeing up resources, I'm freeing up space, I'm reducing my credit consumption so that I am able to make room for additional, scaling out of my data operations. Okay, so here's where the rubber meets the road. Recommendations, right, over here on the right. So what we do here, we can right-size warehouses. So from that t-shirt size perspective, or consolidation of warehouses, collapsing multiples into one. So let's take a look at one. So I'm going to click into this guy. And what it's giving me here is just a list of the top, so many odd records with opportunities for that right sizing of my warehouse. And let's pick one of these guys. So what we're looking at now is a schedule, basically. And what it's saying is, hey, we have a recommendation for a warehouse configuration schedule, right? And just from the graphical layout here, obviously days of the week on the horizontal and hours of the day on the vertical. The gray is the current configuration. The gray for Excel was what was selected by the engineer, right? By the developer. And that's what they selected for their job to run on, right? And what we're saying is in the green, this is the new recommended configuration that if or should you adopt this schedule that Unravel is recommending, you could, on an annualized basis, save over $16,000, right? Or what does that look like in terms of credits? What does that look like in terms of freeing up additional capacity for additional projects, workloads? And so if you were to adopt the schedule, we're saying that, hey, you didn't really need that 4XL for the entire day on Sunday. There were some hours of the day where you could have got by with a 3XL, right? And so what we're saying is if you make these changes and on throughout the days of the week and hours of the day, if you make these changes, you can realize this savings on an annualized basis. And I know this is a small example here in my demo environment, but I think you guys get the picture, right? We want to reduce wastage. We want to run things more cost effectively from that perspective so that we are able to scale at the end of the day and bring on new workloads and generate more revenue for the organization. So good stuff here. So the next thing that I want to do, I'm going to go actually, I'm going to go over to, so I'm still on the homepage. I'm going to go over to this queries subsection of the insights analysis. So at this juncture, I want to talk about that second bullet on the inhibitors related to technical expertise, right? And specifically around finding code level inefficiencies in like your SQL jobs, right? And so why is this important to scaling data operations? Well, obviously, or maybe, the more efficient, the more streamlined your jobs are, the more of them you can run within your budget. So, and to do that, unless you're a very technical SME and you have the time to know how to use things like Query Profiler, in conjunction and along with, what I mentioned earlier, looking at that information schema, those views, and being able to correlate things, you're going to have a very hard time on diagnosing why your query was perhaps slow or failed or was expensive, right? Because you're using some of, the other dashboards that Snowflake provides out of the box that tells you, hey, I have these expensive, long-running queries over here. But why? So, and as that SME, you would have to know exactly which queries you were targeting out of potentially hundreds of thousands of them in your data estate. And the customers that I talk to, there's just not enough, not only people, subject matter experts, right, at that level, but just hours in the day to do your primary job of building new applications and generating revenue for the company, right, and being first to market versus troubleshooting. So again, let's look at this Insights Analysis tab. And let's see. But this time I'm going to focus again on this query section. So there's a couple main categories here. Failed timed out queries. We touched on that, right? And then there's also inefficient queries. So queries with opportunities to improve their performance and cost efficiency, right? So as I had just mentioned, related to scaling your data operations, you want to look at things like this to find ways to run faster, cheaper jobs, to make room for more. So a lot of categories here, filter, different types of filtering and projection inefficiencies, SQL anti-patterns, performance-related inefficiencies, join inefficiencies. I'm just going to pick one and dive into it a little bit here. So the join inefficiencies. And specifically, you can see in kind of my filtering over here on the left, we're specifically looking at avoiding cross joins, right? And I'll just take this top one here. So this is taking us to the query page. I'm going to expand on our efficiencies here. So Unravel is actually um, uh, bringing to your attention multiple inefficiencies, things like slow operators, uh, inefficient usage of functions and predicate, right? Avoiding explosions in data like Cartesian products, and the one that we were focusing on, avoiding cross joins, right? So let's talk about a cross join for a second, right? Why is it important to avoid this in Snowflake? Well, cross joins can lead to exponential data growth, right? Causing performance issues, high query costs. Probably some of you are aware of this. A cross join produces things like a Cartesian product, right? Meaning that every row in, from table A is combined with every row from another table. This can very quickly generate an extremely large resultant set, especially when dealing with large data sets. So, key reasons to avoid these, right? Were explosive row multiplication, right? That's what I was just talking about. Table A has 1 million rows. Table B has 500,000 rows. If you use a cross join, that's 500 billion rows, leading to slow execution, high costs, right? This is inhibitive to our whole goal with respect to scaling our data platform. Not to mention the high processing costs, performance degradation, right? And so what Unravel is providing is recommendations on how to solve for this, right? So, use an inner join with proper conditions, right? Instead of that cross join, and that would bring that resultant set way down, eliminating those inhibitors to loading more workloads, loading more queries and jobs into your platform, allowing you to scale. So, at the end of the day, I guess making corrections for inefficient code, it can drastically free up resources, capacity, credits for current and future scaling needs, especially if your organization has things like concurrency limits, right? As in the number of clusters that can be added in an auto scaling scenario, right? Or if you have problems with queuing bottlenecks, right? With queries waiting, they're queued up, they're waiting for others to finish, right? A cross join could be, a cause of that symptom, or even hitting cluster memory capacity limits, right? If the workload involves large data sets like we're just talking about, these are just some of the things that can happen which degrade performance and can create inhibitors, again, to your data platform scaling needs. So we covered a lot here. And initially we just started out talking about how customers get to the point at which that, they have a need to scale their data operations, right? Next, we discussed some of the inhibitors to those goals. And we just now covered in a very short demo of Unravel's DataOps and FinOps platform, and how leveraging our purpose-built AI to help you find and remove these inefficiencies, and how life would actually be better if you were trying to do things like scale your data platform and Snowflake without breaking your budget, but still getting the value by in your Snowflake investment. So let's see here. in the interest of time, I'll go back to my slideshow here. We already went through these, but I'm going to, okay, I'll leave you with, I know we have a couple questions too. I'll get to those in a second here, as my helper is bringing those up on my other screen. So a free health check. If you think the things that I've been sharing with you today could help you, then you can go today and get a free Snowflake health check simply by visiting the URL that's on the screen. So unraveldata.com/snowflake-health-check-request. Go ahead, check that out. It's free to you, absolutely no cost to you to do this. So I definitely, recommend you try us out, right? Try out the product, see what life could be like if you're, using Unravel for your scaling needs and many other needs, your data ops and your FinOps observability use cases. So I see some questions now. All right. Okay, so first question. What are some common pitfalls organizations face when scaling their Snowflake operations, and how can these be avoided? I guess I'd say first and foremost, those folks, not understanding how and when to balance performance and cost, right? That was our first kind of inhibitor by using some of the Snowflake features. Maybe not having that technical expertise, like we talked about also, and also not doing it in a continuous manner ultimately leads to folks not finding the return on the investment, right, that they were expecting. And so their growth stalls. I've seen that time and time again. Next question. Bring it over here. How does Unravel's approach to cost management differ from traditional methods, and what specific benefits does it offer for rapidly growing data operations? Okay. So how does our methods differ? So first of all, Unravel was purpose-built for modern data stacks like Snowflake. We were born in the big data space. We've been around for over a decade. And so you won't really find any other players in the market that are as comprehensive as Unravel when it comes to those Snowflake-specific use cases. But definitely do your homework. When you're looking to do this at scale at an enterprise level, organizations will ultimately select Unravel as their platform of choice. Last question. This is the last question. All right, so last but not least, can you provide examples of how Unravel's AI-powered platform helped organizations identify and implement cost savings opportunities in their Snowflake operations? Yeah, lots of them. So the most recent one that comes to my mind, large railway operator, right? Logistics industry. These folks were pretty early in their scaling stage with their Snowflake data platform. And what they were really struggling with was cost predictability. So more importantly, they were seeing these huge spikes in costs. They weren't understanding exactly where this stuff was coming from. And so what they would do is they would actually hire costly professional services, right? So folks from Snowflake, maybe also folks from their SI to tackle the problem. So they would come in, they would spend a few weeks, they would go ahead, tackle the problem, think that it was all solved. A couple of months later, another problem comes up. And so it was just kind of rinse and repeat at that point. It was becoming expensive. It was cost prohibitive. So, if you're, trying to optimize, it's challenging, right? Sometimes understanding your jobs, understanding your queries, trying to get in front of it, thinking that this is a set it and forget it thing. That's, not the case, right? So what they were looking for was something more continuous, a more continuous way of identifying inefficiencies and continuously doing it. So they turned to Unravel to be able to look for and identify when these inefficiencies were coming up. Some of the ones that I was demoing a moment ago, but more importantly, how do we equip or support those analysts, those engineers with a solution that can do the analysis for them, right? Prioritize things for them, point them in the right direction out of those, thousands of warehouses and hundreds of thousands, if not more queries, right, that are inefficient, to ensure that they're doing things in a cost-effective, prioritized, performant manner, right? And that's where we came in. We were able to provide some of this, a lot of the inefficiencies, addressing them through our AI-powered platform. And, they were able to finally unlock, really unblock themselves and feel confident. That was, key, right? To feel confident in growing more workloads in their Snowflake estate. So that's it for today. Just checking the clock. Again, my name is Hal Sriver. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.